This is Hospitality 1-to-1, conversations on the industry. Here's your host, Chris Bettis.
Kip, thank you for joining me. I'll tell you what, I think the president would have been an easier guest to get a hold of than you. It's
Possibly.
we had to reschedule this like 18 times. So, again, we're grateful that you're here.
So am I, Chris. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm glad that we both figured it out and how to make it work. Oh. And when I say both of us, I mean me, because I'm the one who rescheduled, right?
You know what? I believe in treating my guests well, so I will never say it was your fault.
Thank you.
Hey, no
problem. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. So I guess it's getting kicked right off because you've got a terrific background here. I mean, you are obviously you're a general manager with F&F Realty in Illinois, and so you kind of bring with it a great amount of experience. You've been a number of different things: front office manager, director of operations, general manager. So you've worn a number of hats. And again, having that unique background in both the hospitality industry when it comes to hotels, restaurants, what have you, what do you feel the differences primarily are? And let's break it down between hotels and restaurants.
Sure. Well, I think it started when I had my Marine Corps experience. That's where I learned a lot of the basic leadership traits. And then once you have that strong foundation, then you can translate that into whatever industry you go in. So specifically from a hotel versus standalone food and beverage facility, I would say number one, and I don't want to offend anybody out there, that's not my intent. Mine is to take my experience and make sure that I am translating that how I see things. You know, I started in food and beverage when I joined the hospitality industry, and I think it's very unique. First and foremost, I probably am not going to take my laptop out in the middle of a lobby as a general manager of a hotel, but I will as a general manager of a restaurant into where my diners sit during slow periods to get my admin done. So number one, I would say that's probably a simple difference. It'd be kind of odd to see the GM sitting on one of the soft seating out there in the lobby. But I think the biggest is probably just the longevity of an individual going into food and beverage specifically versus a hotel hospitality job. So for instance, let's say I'm a server jumping into the hospitality food and beverage industry. I may be seeking a different career through attending university or additional schooling on a trade while earning my way and getting income in the food and beverage industry. The likelihood that I'm going to go into finance in food and beverage is less than probably going into finance in the hotel industry. So I think that's the main difference. You've got those on-property key roles that you have in hotels that you don't necessarily have in a standalone food and beverage facility. So yeah, you may go into a corporate role outside of the actual food service operation, but the likelihood, I think, is much less. And I think we see that in the numbers of turnover in food and beverage versus hotels.
That's a great point because, so in other words, what you're saying is people more consider a food and beverage to be a side job in many cases as opposed to their career.
I think side job is one way of putting it, but I think the tenure is just shorter. I think people sometimes jump into the food and beverage industry not realizing that they enjoy it and they're going to spend time into it. But I think the majority of them usually use it as a transition into maybe school, into a career that they're going to have long term. That's all I'm saying.
Now, speak to this when it comes to the education side, because you brought up a great point. You're talking about those who are on the hotel side, kind of having a track, if you will, starting off at one point and working the way up through the hotel, and it can be through education, if you will. Do you feel as though food and beverage offers that same track if there's someone who does enjoy the F&B side of things and starting out as a server and they eventually wish to become a restaurant GM or what have you? Is there that same track in the education system for them that it would be in the hotels?
You know, that's a good question. I haven't personally had that experience from an education perspective. If we're talking about traditional university education, I think individuals who go into hospitality management more so tend to go towards the hotel side or the culinary side. Maybe not as much so on the food and beverage administration, management, operations management side. Now, I have no facts to back that up. That's just what I've seen based on how I've come up in the industry. So, but as far as progression in the industry, listen, you can get to a six-figure income just as quick, if not quicker, in the food and beverage industry if you have the work ethic, weekends, holidays, late nights in food and beverage in the restaurant industry to get to that management level. I mean, mine was 6 months as a server, coming out of the Marine Corps, going into serving. In 6 months, I was in management. Now, granted, I wasn't in the six-figure level, but the path for that could have been a few years. So I think the opportunity is there in both food and beverage and hotels, but how you get there is going to be a little bit different. And the competition is going to be a little bit stronger because the positions are less in getting from server to management and then to GM. As opposed to hospitality, you can go into different fields to get the experience that is required to be a hotel GM. Now, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. Let's talk about the progression, because I want to drill down on the person, if you will. So you look at someone who is in the hotel side of things and someone in the F&B side, restaurant side, and they're working their way up to management. Are you looking for the same, and again, I know the skills are different, but the same personality type, same type of person for hotels that you would for restaurants and food and beverage, or is it a different type of person?
Sure. I think the person, the individual, I always hire for character and personality. You want to make sure that work ethic is in there, but that's part of your character. So as long as you have a strong character and they have the personality that fits within your culture of your property, be it food and beverage or hotel, then I think you've got a solid hire. Now, from an expectation perspective, that's when we have to manage things differently. I manage my expectations based on a tenure of a food and beverage employee differently than I do a hotel employee, based on what I learn about them during the interview. But specifically, I always try and sell the hotel career is more vast and can be longer as far as the term of your career, based on the flexibility and different paths you can take within hotels. So it's really managing my expectations and make sure that I'm communicating those effectively to the person that I'm bringing on board. If that
makes total sense.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. So one last question before we kind of delve into other topics.
Sure.
You were talking about the turnover originally when it comes to there's a higher turnover when you deal with restaurants as opposed to hotels. We know
Sure.
across the board turnover is around 70% or a little more across industry, if you will, hospitality in general. But given the fact that we're saying that there's a little higher turnover in F&B as opposed to hotels, I know there's some part of it that you have to just deal with the fact that that people are in this job now and they're going to go to school for something else and then they're going to graduate and move on in their career. That's one thing. But
Sure.
how do you mitigate turnover if it is higher? What steps can you take if you're a restaurant manager or a restaurant owner to try to mitigate that turnover in the company?
Well, personally, how I do it, whether I'm in food and beverage or whether I'm in hotels, if you want to decrease it in food and beverage, you have to invest in people more so than your profit and loss statement. See, as operators, we are under the direction of our owners, and our owners like to make sure that we're hitting our numbers. And managers think because our owners want us to hit numbers that I have to focus on my P&L statement. Well, that's completely false. If you focus on your people, if you value your people, if you invest in your people, you put time in your people, then guess what? The numbers will automatically take care of themselves. So as you can tell, I'm a little bit passionate about that. We invest so much time in reporting and making sure that our numbers make sense that we lose track of what's most important. The most valuable asset and the highest number on our P&L statement are people. So we really have to treat our people right, listen to what their wants and needs are, and figure out a way that we can help them achieve their goals so that our profit and loss statements looks much better. And we become that profitability asset that our owners are looking for. That's how you win. And that's how you get your people to where they want to be, because it's not about us as operators. It's about getting people where they want to be, so that when you're called upon to go somewhere else, you have a succession plan for the next person who's in line, ready to sit in your seat.
So you're almost, in a sense, using the adage of constantly thinking about people, because in a sense you'd like to be able to replace yourself figuratively, and you have to develop the right people to do that.
Absolutely. And it's really a culture thing. So whether you're developing those people on site, or you're setting a mindset and a culture that says we welcome people who are looking to progress, that would sacrifice the betterment of themselves for the whole, because I want somebody who is concerned with the whole, not with themselves. And when you're concerned with the whole, everybody wins, not just one person. So it's really setting the culture properly so that when people come in, they see, wow, I can be successful here. I'm going to stay, because people are all about success for the entire asset or assets that you control, not just self-fulfillment, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, Obviously, you talked about the passion you have for the industry, and obviously your dedication, determination, and the passion you have did not come overnight. So I wanted to take a moment, if we can, and give you a chance to tell your story. I know you talked about the Marines, talked about serving. Give me an idea, if you will, what brought you into the hospitality industry in general?
Sure. Well, it's funny. I have a folder that they gave me in the Marine Corps, and I don't want to date myself, but essentially it has the year that I was born on it, and it held all my important documents. And somebody wrote on there, Kip, making stuff happen since 19 blah, blah, blah. I don't want to date myself there, but really I think I was born with the hospitality gene. I think there's individuals who don't have it and can develop that skill set. But I think I was naturally, I'm my mother's son, as far as, just thinking about other people first. And I am a pleaser. I like to please people. I like to see people happy. And if I can make somebody happy during my day, just one person happy, then I've had a successful day, Chris. I can honestly go home and say, man, I made somebody smile today, or I turned somebody's poor day into a positive day. So that's really what it is for me. And I think it was just ingrained in the fabric of who I am. But furthermore, it was also nurtured, through my development, in my home life and in my spiritual life and in my faith growing up. But then I took that to the next level when I joined the Marines and figured out, there's discipline involved in here, and I should probably get some priorities and organization in line to get my life, exactly where it should be going, and realize my potential as a leader. So that's where I got my leadership. I don't want to leave my ninth grade teacher out, Teresa Burgess. I got to give her a shout out, who kind of carried me through my high school years. But, it's paying attention to individuals who are smarter and had a good head on their shoulders and saw the value in me, and listening well and heeding their advice and implementing what they had to say. So, one of the most important things that I've had in my later years is having a career mentor. I have a spiritual mentor. I have a personal mentor. I have 4 mentors, Chris. And I have 2 that are past mentors that I don't speak with as much, but I've had 6 mentors over my life, and probably even more. You have to have people pouring into you constantly so you don't get empty, because our job as operators are to pour into, currently I have 115 associates in my hotel, but really I'm pouring into my community, into leaders in the community, into people that are in my church, that are in my, my kids' school, as many people as I come into contact with. So if I don't have people pouring into me, how can I expect to be cutting edge, to be a good listener, right? Which is most important, not giving advice, but asking good questions and listening well on how I can support others. I have to have people pouring into me constantly. So that's really the core of my story.
That's an absolutely phenomenal story, actually. It shows your growth when it comes to leadership. It shows how you've become who you are. It's your identity, if you will.
Yes.
You brought up a fascinating statement. You keep talking about pouring into people. And you talk about the mentors you have. And I look at it, you're a GM, you've had, for example, over 100 employees under your command, if you will, at the hotel. Obviously, you can more intentionally pour out to one or two or three or five people. How do you pour out to 100 people? How do you instill your motivation, your commitment, and your lessons, if you will, your training to a large audience?
It's a great question, Chris. My job is to lead leaders. And if you're listening to this and you don't have leaders underneath you, then you need to develop them and turn them into leaders. Or maybe you need to get some more education on what it means to be a leader, not a manager. But my job is to lead leaders. And if I have more people than probably on two hands, and really on more than one hand, that I'm not pouring into those leadership principles, then it's really challenging to reach those people who are underneath those individuals who are leading them. So really it's taking those principles that I know and sharing them with key individuals, department heads, or really not just department heads, but the unspoken leaders within your sphere of influence that can make the greatest impact. So I have several. I have about 6, and one of them isn't necessarily on my EC, my executive committee. One of them is a good, strong voice in the hotel that can carry a message. And so my job is to ensure that my communication with that individual is strong, so the message is heard through kind of that grassroots or that, on the ground force communication string, whatever that is, right? So you really have to invest in those individuals who can make the biggest impact on your associates. But still, I have a door that's always open, and people love to come in and share what's going on with them. And I don't care what you're doing, you have to figure out, we all have 24 hours in our day, and you need to prioritize your time and know that your most valuable asset, that biggest number on your P&L statement, is the person that is right in front of you at that moment. They're the most valuable person. So you need to stop, look, and listen to what they have to share.
I was looking over your background, and obviously we talked about how you've been a front office manager, director of operations. You obviously, and now of course a general manager, but you had a unique title. You worked with LRA by Deloitte, formerly
Yes.
LRA Worldwide. You were the quality assurance consultant. So kind of walk that back. What exactly did you handle and see when you visited hotels while working with LRA?
Chris, I figured this may come up, and I'll tell you, our short 30-minute time together couldn't even scratch the surface on what goes into that. But I'll tell you, I'll give it my best shot here in a few minutes. As a quality assurance consultant, our job is quite vast. The responsibility is large. We dictate what happens to hotel leadership, to line level associates at about 150 hotels annually. And depending on your territory, mine was North America, but I also was fortunate enough to go overseas. I went to the Emirates, the Middle East. I went to the UK, and was able to, learn just as much as I was able to share best practices. But my role consists of, here's a week in the life, 2 weeks in the life of Kip as a quality assurance consultant. Hop on a plane on Monday with an expectation to do about 4 or 5 property audits, check into a hotel under a mystery alias, and spend anywhere from 1 to 3 nights at a property, and essentially go through all encounters that a guest would experience while they were at a property, be it the fitness center, be it the business center, be it encountering any guest services from afternoon tea all the way down to, concierge or just the check-in, check-out process at any given property, transportation from an airport, valet services, everything. And go through that process and write a report on how each encounter experience went and draw out every detail that I could. And then with most properties, I would check out usually 2 nights later, and I'd walk over sometimes to get my car and maybe turn right back around and go announce myself with my real name, who I really was, and my purpose for being there. And that's usually when hearts would drop into the pit of their stomach and wondering how they did during that checkout process. And they would go announce me to a GM or the executive committee. And I'd spend the next 8 hours walking with the executive team, anywhere from 5 to 30 individuals, through every square foot of the property, including a sample of guest rooms, to determine the quality, the brand standards, the cleanliness, the condition, and delivery of that product to guests. And then the following morning, I would wake up and we would have a debrief, summary review of how the overall stay went, and then I would cover the guest encounters that I experienced. And then I'd repeat that process at several hotels, and I would go home after 11 days and spend a 3-day weekend with my family.
Wow.
So that's the process in a nutshell.
I'm picturing the Mission Impossible theme while you're like walking into the hotel at this point. Very covert, Do you have a mustache?
Yeah.
Do you have a mustache and glasses to you when you walked in? I mean, that's
right.
Wow. So I mean, that had to be very. I mean, it sounds like it's rewarding, but it also had to be very demanding from a family standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my time away from the family, I got to spend usually about 6 to 7 days a month home, but I spent at least one weekend every other week away. So it's fantastic if you want to see the world. So those of you who are listening who are interested in getting into a quality assurance consultant type role, know that you'll be away from your family and friends, but know that you'll save a lot of money while you're on the road, and you'll get to experience things, sites that you've probably will never get the opportunity to experience. And by the way, America is a beautiful country if you give it the chance, and see some of the things that are less seen. But, you do spend a lot of time away from the family, and it is difficult at times.
I have to ask, being in the industry, we know how often someone goes from hotel A to hotel B, city to city, what have you. Did you ever have the same person twice, 2 different hotels, run into an employee at one hotel who later was at another hotel?
Absolutely. So it's funny. The director of operations of the Westin in Kansas City turned out to be one of the last properties that I audited, the hotel manager of the Westin in Cincinnati. So it was funny. I'm traveling under an alias.
Right.
Sometimes that's challenging for those of you who are FOMs and understand, rooms division managers. Oh, how would that work? Because you need an ID and everything. Call me, I'll tell you all about it. But, trying to hide your true identity was difficult. But those were such big properties. I mean, they're 500-room properties, 600-room properties. It's a little bit easier because he's focused on the day-to-day and executing the operation. But when he saw me after I announced and presented myself, he was shaking his head. And, we had a great encounter on the first go-round. So, but yeah, he was definitely he was laughing about that one, to say the least.
I can only imagine. You obviously, I wanted to ask you, because obviously you're in Chicago, very prominently in the area. How did you end up in Chicago from Indy? I mean, what do you see the difference, such as going from a market like Indy to a large market like Chicago?
Sure. It started when I was a quality assurance consultant in Dallas. I was on the road, and a smart man, Dan Kaplan, wonderful leader, absolutely one of my favorite leaders that I've had. I was auditing his property, and he goes, Kip, you're a family man. You need to get off the road. Why don't you come run one of my assets in Indy? And I said, well, I live in Texas. He goes, we'll figure that out, but you need to get to my hotel in Indy. Well, after being there for a year and a half and learning a lot, our fund is franchise property, and the fund to renew that asset, unfortunately, was not being refunded. And so it was more advantageous for the company to sell the asset to the hospital campus of which it sat, the Hilton there in Indy, than to refund it. So they took advantage of that and sold the asset. And as soon as I knew it was coming up for sale, I had been through a management takeover before, and it was actually my fourth management takeover. And I survived three, and I didn't want to know how the fourth one was going to go and roll the dice. So, I put my information out there, and there wasn't another opening within the franchise for me at that time. So I decided, I'm going to put my resume out there and see if I get any bites. And this executive recruiter by the name of John Carpenter randomly connected with me with Snelling, and man, it was a match made in heaven, and we've been friends ever since. But he and I had a 40-minute phone call on the way to pick up my kids from daycare, and I was at my new position within, I think, 45 days or so, living in the hotel within 30. So it was perfect match, and it was a big move. It was 85 inches of snow that year in Chicago, but we were fortunate enough to have 65 inches of snow in Indy that year, so my wife was already,
preconditioned.
Preconditioned before Chicago. And since then, it's been light here in Chicago, so we've been fortunate, but it's a different market altogether.
So you're ready for Buffalo now, aren't you? 110, 120 inches of snow. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, Chris, sign me up.
I bet. So, obviously, we had talked a lot before. You have really been focusing on the importance of that number one asset, the employee. And obviously, you are also very focused on community growth within your current hotel. So why is it so important to focus on community growth?
Well, Chris, currently, and this doesn't just go for a suburban property, but if you take that value and you apply it to whatever you're talking about, if you value people and you value the most important person, that being the one that's in front of you, then why not the people that are in the community that have wants and needs just as much as the people who are in front of you that you employ? I think we have a corporate responsibility to reach out to those who are in need and do it in a way that shows who has more professional hospitality than a hotel and our food and beverage, service providers. So we should emulate how citizens should act out in the community. And if we're hoteliers, if we're the experts on hospitality, then we should set that example for others to emulate. And so I think not only is it our corporate responsibility, but specifically in our industry, we should show others how to do that effectively. And does it come back to our benefit? Absolutely. That's not why we do it. That's a benefit of doing something that you're passionate about and seeing lives changed in your community. And I think that's why we do it. And when you set a culture that's all about it, then you find yourself doing all sorts of weird things you never thought you would and impacting lives that probably never would have been impacted if somebody didn't just say, let's try this.
One of the things we pride ourselves here on the podcast is we don't like to tell you what to do without giving you ideas on how to do it. So in that spirit, if you're a hotel that perhaps is not as community focused, or if you're a new GM and you want to breathe some new life into the hotel when it comes to working with the community, what are a couple of first steps that you can take to become more community focused?
I think the number one skill set that you need is to learn how to speak in front of a group. And that coupled with, if you have ever been to a networking group, or if you haven't been to a networking group, you need to. And you need to learn the skill sets that it takes to network. Because if you don't know, you can walk into a room full of people that is ripe of people that have wants and needs that either your hotel or your associates can help, or you yourself can help people with. But if you don't know how to connect with people, if you don't know how to walk up to a group of 2 people, 3 people talking, then you're not going to make an impact. You're not going to make that introduction that's necessary. And everything starts with a step, Chris. You can't walk in to a large group of people or to a group of people that have influence and expect to change the world, okay? Or expect to change your community overnight. You got to start small, and you got to start with one person. It's one introduction. It's one introduction to the right person that may not happen right away, but it starts small with one introduction to one person. And it may be a bumpy introduction. The conversation may not be as eloquent or as smooth as you want it to go, but it comes with practice, is how you can reach for perfection. So if you know that you're not going to change the world in that first conversation, you may have some more and greater confidence going into it. But practice on anybody, anywhere, and figure out how to network. You know that you're not supposed to go into a group of people that are all closed arms facing inwards and try and break into their conversation. You got to go up to people who look open and have a spot that you can fill in a gap and just create conversation and jump in and see where you may or may not fit into that group of individuals. And then figure out who your key politicians are, figure out who your key decision makers are in your community, and see how you can help them. See, it's not about what's in it for me. People go into these conversations or go into these meetings wondering what's in it for me. No, your goal when you go into a community or you want to change the culture of your hotel or your industry or your facility of which you manage or you have control over, you go in saying what's in it for them. What do I have that can be beneficial for them? Because that's how you make changes. That's how you get attention. That's how you get people in your sphere of influence or under your control or under your responsibility to learn, wow, this person doesn't really just care about themselves. They really care about changing things for the better for their community and for individuals who have wants and needs that need to be met.
You know, in the spirit of us continuing with the how-to, if you will, you had brought up, because the advice you're giving is fantastic. You had talked about, again, one of the most important assets being your employees and how you have to champion your employees. You're speaking a lot about, of course, employer brand, which is something we talk about quite often here on the podcast. So, you know, let's offer some tips. If you're a hotelier who either A, has a less than desirable employer brand, or just to be honest, you haven't really made it a focus in your hotel. Again, what are a couple steps you can take to help improve that brand?
Well, first and foremost, if you have the vision, if you have the desire to make a positive change for your employer brand, first of all, don't leave. Number one, don't leave. And number two, don't think that you can't make a change, because it's people who continue to leave employer brands that need individuals with desire and passion and the want to make a positive difference. When they leave, then they're not supporting the change for all the people who are employed by that employer brand. You are giving up the hope for those that want to see that change come to fruition. So start small, start at your property, change the service culture. And number two, see how you can be infectious to other leaders within the employer brand to do the same. So just as much as you're saying what's in it for me, how that's not such the best thing to do, what's in it for them, what's in it for the other hotel GMs or the other food and beverage leaders or the other, operational leaders or directors of sales out there that need that change. Don't leave. That's the worst thing you can do. You want to help the employer brand? Then make a difference. Know that you can make a difference and take one small step in the right direction. Have good conversations, healthy conversations, and be bold. Be bold without offending, without stepping on anybody's feet, but be tactful and direct and be bold. And actually know that you can make a difference. And the difference that you're making is not for you. You're making a difference for the people that you employ and the people that you impact on a day-to-day basis. So just do it.
Just do it. Like the old Nike adage, just do it.
Just do it.
Great takeaways, Kip. Great takeaways. We are out of time. Before we wrap up here, if people want to pick your brain, anything you've talked about has really struck them, if you will, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think the best way, they can reach me on my cell phone or they can reach out to me like most people these days. Kip.Stehling at gmail.com is the best way to connect with me. 214-600-4800. I give my cell phone number away to every guest that checks into the hotel. And for the past 4 years at this property, I've had 7 phone calls. And guess what? 5 of them were for compliments. So I'll tell you, it's okay to give your cell phone number out. Not a lot of people are going to call anyways. And if they do, it's probably to say thank you or to give you positive feedback on how you've impacted them one way or another.
Well, we're going to spread your cell phone number even further out there. We'll put that cell phone number, we'll put your email address up on the good old hospitality1to1.com website, and people can reach out to you that way. Kip, truly an honor to talk to you again today. Great conversation. As always, wish you the best of luck in 2018. I know you have a lot of exciting things ahead, and best of luck.
Thanks so much, Chris, and I really do appreciate the time and the invitation, and really enjoy your weekend, okay?
Hey, thank you very much. Have a great day.